So to talk about that why couldn't breakthrough be achieved at this round of talks in Abu Dhabi, because this was the first time both the Russians and the Ukrainians were sitting on the table or across the table with, of course, help from American diplomats and negotiators. But why could not they break the impasse? I'm joined on the show by Manjeev Singh Puri, former senior diplomat. Thank you, sir, for being on the show. Ambassador, when they went into the talks, both President Zelensky and even President Trump yesterday at Davos were making statements that, you should be optimistic about it. Both leaders want a deal. But then why did we see it all fizzle out today?
Repertoire, thank you very much. And I like the way you opened this. Well, the Americans are in a hurry. The Ukrainians are under tremendous pressure. Look what your report said. People are acknowledging the fact that you can't beat the Russians, but the Russians think the wind is in their sail. And so therefore, be maximalist in your demands. And you do have the Americans sort of putting even additional pressure on the Ukrainians. It's not just the military facts, the incessant bombardment all around in Ukraine, the havoc that the Russians are wreaking on them, the severe winter, and all of those particular factors coming there. So I'm afraid, I'm glad, in fact, to hear that people are willing to continue the talks. But usually these kind of talks reach some kind of fruition in an equilibrium manner if both sides feel a little exhausted, not if one thinks that he or she has something still to gain and is in a position to be moving forward, unless you say that there is win-win, but one win is with a very small W and the other one is with a very big win, with a W, very large one.
When the negotiators came out of that room, Ambassador Puri, they said the talks were held in a constructive and a positive atmosphere. When you diplomats say that, what should we make of it? Because Zelensky on one hand says Russia is not serious, they are continuing brutal attacks. Then both sides says, well, it was constructive and positive.
Well, these are code words that, we shall continue to talk. And in a sense, the most important code word is that they haven't collapsed and they are not going back into, there's no talks, nothing, and we will just continue. This by itself is, let me put it to you like this, not a bad sign. It's okay, things will continue, but they aren't, reaching this great point that you can sing hosannas tomorrow. Of course, President Trump would like that to happen. He's on record saying that he thought he could end it in 1 week, but it's gone on for more than a year. He certainly wants this done. The Ukrainians, I think, at the level of the people, are fairly tired, exhausted. They want something out. But the demand of the Russians, especially in the Donetsk area, of even saying that areas which are currently held by the Ukrainians should be ceded to them, a kind of, Russia land or whatever you may call it, to be created, being part of that, is extremely difficult politically, I think, not only for President Zelensky, but I believe for the entire country of Ukraine. It's a very tough call, and these discussions will have to go on while the Ukrainians continue to get battered by the Russians and the severe winter.
So you think territory remains, especially in the Donetsk and the eastern Donbass region, remains the sticking point of the negotiations?
No, I have little doubt that this is by far the biggest sticking point. There would be several others, the demands of the Russians that Ukraine have no part of NATO, no joining of NATO, that the Ukrainian defense forces be cut down to size, that international observers out there are not those which are inimical to the Russian interest. All of those would be there. For despite whatever has been said, especially when he meets European leaders, I'm not sure that the American side in their negotiations are not willing to go along with several of them. Because in their understanding, I take you back to the original thing when it all started. The entire business of Ukraine and the Russians falling apart, etc., has something to do with a thinking in certain political circles in the United States that the Russians should be diminished. There were other circles, notably Henry Kissinger and James Baker, etc., who felt that, look, you need détente, you need engagement with the Russians. Now, Mr. Trump favored that. But, you know, his way of looking at it is he thinks Russia is an important power with whom the United States should, you know, do a deal. He thinks the Europeans and, if I may say, by extension rather, or the other way around, the Ukrainians and by extension also the Europeans are being unnecessarily cussered. They're losing people. They're not gaining anything. And why should the United States be, what should I say, spending money with very little direct gain to itself? So these are political thoughts. These are the ways people think. But by now,
but Ambassador, if Trump wants to cut a deal with Putin, then what is stopping that? Because he is in constant touch with them. Yesterday itself, Putin met with his two envoys, Jared Kushner and what is the other person's name?
Steve Witkoff.
Steve Witkoff. I'm sorry. Yes. So you know those talks, those channels are open. So where is the problem? Why can't they settle for a deal? Or is Europeans or the Europeans are not amenable?
So, Amritpal, if it was a deal between the Americans and the Russians, you could cut a deal. But it's a deal over Ukraine and in the proximity of Europe. So, you know, in the United States too, it's not just President Trump who holds sway. Look at the Congress. Large number of congressmen from both sides have great deal of sympathy for Ukraine. They want to pass all kinds of legislation providing for money and aid for Ukraine. And so therefore there is a huge amount of political impetus to all this. And secondly, the Europeans have also been playing their game in whichever way, not being particularly successful, but they've been able to stall things, etc. So it's not a very easy task. It may appear very easy, you know, you're saying thousands are being killed and we are trying to bring peace, that's all right. But, you know, at the end of the day, the peace also has to have at least some semblances of honorability. For many in America, including in their political scene, there is America as a leader of the world and not one who cuts deals on the other side with somebody like Putin, who for several years, both sides of the aisle have derided. So it is not an easy task. And in the end, what Mr. Witkoff and Jared Kushner have to get through for President Trump is something that looks good for America. I've made money. We've got you rare earth, but also, you know, that the entire idea, there's been a certain degree of safeguard. At least you need to be able to kind of sell it to the public at large, even in your own country, let alone among your allies.
Well, at least the only ray of hope that's there is that, you know, they are still open to talking to each other and meeting again in Abu Dhabi. Whether they make much headway on that, whether the time is right now for that, only future will tell. Ambassador Manjeet Singh Puri, thank you very much for being on the show and sharing your insights. Always a pleasure to have you. Thank you.